Anybody before we sat down checked the chair before they sat down? Who checked the chair to look and see? Maybe it was cracked. Maybe one person, two persons, no person. Did you check your chair?
Every single boy has checked the chair, I promise you. I promise you.
But that cloud, we're not checking our chairs. Unless we have a reason to check our chairs. Why would we check our chairs generally?
It's just a habit.
For big guys, it's a habit. I had a big habit of checking chairs, 70 pounds earlier. Put it back, right? No, but when you check the chair, you just want to see if there's a small crack or something. You're not going like this to see if it's going to hold you up. Any of those type of things, people don't do that. Why don't they do it? Because there's a belief already. They already have an Emuna that the chair is going to hold them. They already believe. They don't need to think about that. They sat in enough chairs. They know what a chair looks like. And when they go to sit down, they go and sit inside the chair, right? And they don't even think twice about it, unless you've had a few falls, Unless you're a big guy, that not every chair is going to have that. I remember, Baruch Hashem, I've graduated from stacking chairs to sitting in one plastic chair at a time, Baruch Hashem. So anybody that knows what it's like to have experienced some falls, and, other than that, we don't check our chairs. So the emes is that there's a place in Emuna, in Hashem, that we could get to such a place where we don't got to check anything. We know Hashem's got us. And we know Hashem's there. And there's a deep nakuda inside of each and every one of us where everything is already there. I'm sorry already, disclaimer, I'm not going to be pushing everybody to be learning Torah, because that's all you're going to hear your whole entire life from the Torah world is learn Torah, learn Torah, learn Torah. Okay, Baruch Hashem, I'm going to be telling you something else. I'm going to tell you that there's a Torah very, very deep inside of you. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite stories that you probably heard before, but since it's my favorite story, I'm going to tell it over to you again. There's a beautiful story of Reb Zusha Vanipoli, that one of his Talmidim came to him once. And this Talmud came to him and he said to him that my father was an early Yid. His father was a religious Jew, he had Torahs and mitzvahs, he was very serious. He said that my father, after he had passed on, he's come to me 3 nights in a row telling me that I need to convert to Christianity. 3 nights in a row. And he's sitting at the table, Reb Zusha, he tells him the story, and Reb Zusha starts scratching, rubbing his head, and he looks up at his Talmud and he says to him, I want you to go to your father's grave, I want you to dig it up, and I want you to remove the cross that they threw inside on his matzah. They threw something on his in his grave, and I want you to go and take it out. After that, you should be fine. So he goes to the cemetery, digs it up, and lo and behold, there's a cross that one of the Galatim men threw in there. Closes it back up, the dream stopped. And as you can imagine, the story became very, very famous, and it travels all the way back, across the way to Vilna. And they tell over this story to the Gaon of Vilna. And he's walking back and forth, and he's so perplexed at this story. And so the Talmidim around him ask him, what's so perplexing? Why is this hard for you to make with it? So the Vilna Gaon says, it's not the story really that bothers me. It's just the fact that, Hasidim, they don't learn Gemara. And the only way that he would have been able to know this if he would have learned a certain piece of the Yerushalmi. And everybody knows Hasidim don't learn Gemara. So it's perplexing for me how Reb Zusha was able to come to such a conclusion. So with the Vilna Gaon, what he said travels all the way back to Anipoli and gets to Reb Zusha. And he tells Reb Zusha, says that the only way you would have known this if you would have learned a certain daf in the Yerushalmi. And everybody knows Hasidim don't learn, so, where'd you get this from? So Reb Zusha laughs, he chuckles, and he says that he's right. I didn't get it from the Yerushalmi, but I got it from where the Yerushalmi got it from. That's where I got it from. Meaning, and the nimshal in this is that inside of us, Hashem has given us every single thing, every single piece of light, every single piece of emes has already been inside of you. It's been programmed inside of you. And as much as Hashem loves us and He wants us close to us, and He's going out of His way all day long just to reach, just that we would notice Hashem just even a little bit. Hashem is an anav. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, how did he learn his anivus? He was spending 60 years in the desert, 60 years in the desert, out there with Hashem. And he learned anivus. Even after that, he comes and brings a whole nation outside of another nation after this, and everybody's coming up to him, Rebbe, and after that, he still gets to be permitted to write on himself that he was the most humble person ever walked. How did he learn such anivus? He learned it from spending time with Hashem. Hashem is an anav. Hashem is an anav. Hashem doesn't stop nature and all these things in order for a person to notice him, but he's subtle, he's quiet. Like it says in Malachim when he was speaking to Eliyahu Hanavi, where his voice, Hashem is not in the earthquake, he's not in the wind, he's not in the, Hashem is a small, still voice speaking to us every day. Baruch Hashem had the privilege of being a student of Rav Arushs, and I remember once him being asked, and me being there when he was asked, how do you know when something's Yetzer Hara, and how do you know when it's Hashem? Because it's very, very hard to distinguish sometimes. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara dresses up in a black suit, he has a beard, and a black hat, and everything else, and it could be Mamash the Yetzer Hara. By the way, he knows more Torah than we do. Anyway. So we never know really what's the emes, what's not the emes. So how are we able to differentiate when we're being pressed to do something, even if it feels like it's a mitzvah, but we don't really know. We don't really know. So Rav Arush in his genius answered like this. He says that when something is approaching you, it's come to you, and it's pressing, and it won't stop, and it's loud, and it's pushing you, that's how you know it's the Yetzer Hara. Because Hashem's voice is thin, small, it's a quiet, still voice. Quiet, still voice. The problem we have, that we're unable to hear Hashem when He's calling out to us, is because there's so much noise going on all the time. It's impossible to hear Kol Hashem. It's impossible. The world is crazy. The rain in Manchester drowns it out. You can't hear Hashem. All right? Very, very hard. Probably can hear Hashem a lot better in the rain than you can in the sun. Honestly, a lot of preachers comes out when the sun comes out. But Hashem, at least it's to keep people's clothes on for a little bit. But it's very, very hard to hear Kol Hashem with everything else, or the gadgets, the loud music, and these black Jewish rappers and everything else. It's so loud. Everything's loud all the time that we can't hear Hashem. So there's a wonderful solution for this, being able to hear Hashem. Thank you. I'm so happy you're joining us, by the way. It's a big milah, more than anything else that I've seen, and I'm telling you this. I'm not pushing onto you to oh, you gotta shtai. Only reason why I'm not doing this is because you'll hear it already. And take this as insert this. I would say add this as an extra, but I'm not going to tell you add it as extra. Put this underneath everything else that everybody else is going to tell you. The wonderful art of his devotedness of talking to Hashem and getting yourself away from the rest of the world. I can promise you this. I can promise you this as a person who has devoted my life to this. Your life will be a different life. Your relationship to Hashem is a different type of relationship. Your relationship to Yiddishkeit is a different type of relationship. Everything changes. It's a brand new thing once you take on the oath of talking to Hashem every single day, to get away from the rest of the world, to be alone, and to get to know Hashem. It's very, very, very important. It's tough. This is why we're here. Hashem says that why do we suffer? It says my people suffer for a lack of das. There's a lack of knowledge. What do we not know? Every time the word das is coming up just about in the Chassidish form, it's talking about a kesher, a das, a certain knowing that there's a kesher. In the same way that Adam knew Chava, there's a certain level of intimacy with that das. That's not enough to know about. A lot of people know about Hashem. There's been people learning in Yeshiva for 30, 40, 50 years and they know about Hashem. And it's not about the book. It's not about, a lot of people are not davuk to Hashem, they're davuk to textbooks. And it's college. In college for 40, 50 years, it's been an intellectual exercise. I'm not to down anybody, but didn't change or didn't move one single meter about themselves at all. But they've been learning. That can't be tachlis. That can't be tachlis. And in all the learning, they never picked up the book after which everybody's called the people of the book. Nobody learned Tanakh even. They learned Tanakh. They learned Tanakh. But I'm being honest with you. I'm not here to shoot anybody down. I'm just being honest with you. Hashem wants to live. He wants us to be close to him. He wants us to know who he is. Know your father. Know who he is. You have to know who he is. The best way to do that is to communicate. There's no way to have a relationship with anybody unless you're communicating with them. Not only marriage, friendship. You have friends because you communicate with them. The moment you're not communicating with people, they're not your friends. No matter how much you love them, I understand you can have people that are distant, relevant, and yes, we call them friends. They are friends, right? It doesn't take away the fact that we have a bond or that we have a relationship with somebody. But that relationship is not actualized without the communication. So many things can change. People change over the years. I have many friends that I grew up with. They have changed a lot. Unfortunately, a lot of them for the worse. But they've changed a lot. And there's no real connection between us, and there's no communication, largely because we have nothing to communicate about. We're not even in the same world. But Hashem is close to everyone who calls upon him be'emet, in truth. And we're talking to Hashem with truth. Means from your nakuda, what you're going through, and from your place, and where you're at, that you could call out to Hashem from that place, and Hashem will come close to you. Hashem is close to all who call upon him in truth. And if you draw close to him, Hashem will draw close to you. There's no doubt about it. I guarantee that I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen it with my own eyes. Tefillahs after tefillahs after tefillah. And the main reason why we need to get away from everybody else, why his boded is to be boded, to be alone, away from everybody else, is because of all the noise. And not only the noise itself, actual places, areas, once you're around, other people, whatever, has hashpah on you. The Rambam says that if a person finds that they're in a certain locale, certain place, and they see that there's no tzaddikim there, right? They need to move to a place with our tzaddikim. He says if he goes over there and he finds out the whole entire thing is a hoax, right? There's no real tzaddikim over there also. He said it's better for the person to dwell and live alone than to have the hashpah of these people on him. I thought about something amazing. Rabbi Nachman, when he gives his eitzah for his bodidus and Lekutei Maran to a nun base, he talks about a person not only going to seclude himself, but he says a person needs to go outside of the city, and he needs to go and talk to Hashem at night, in the middle of the night, outside the city. I don't recommend this for everybody who's scared of wild animals, but it's the main eitzah that he gives. At night, outside the city, and he needs to go to a place where people don't walk, either by day or by night. And he says, and if the person goes there, he can be mevatel everything. He can mamish reach the highest level of bittul to Hashem, and he can have the highest level of kesher with Hashem if he does this, if he does this eitzah. So I start thinking about this, and I start thinking about this Rambam, right? Both of them are very, very, they're connected. How? There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. He was walking with a few of his Talmidim through the forest, and was one of his Talmidim who was standing in a particular place, and he started having bad thoughts, bad yehurim, and the Baal Shem Tov looks over to him and he says, you know why you're having these thoughts? He says, because in the place where you're standing, somebody was murdered, and you standing there is giving you hashpah on what happened previously, so you're starting to have bad yehurim. So in other words, it's very, very hard for a person to come to a place of bittul. Even if he picks a makom himself, the makom itself isn't conducive for the person to be able to cry out to Hashem properly. So let alone, can you imagine how much it is when you hear about the noise, all the nonsense that's going on daily, and the news. Look how many people are ended up in the crazy houses this year because of the news, all the fear mongering, everything else that they got going on. The whole world is going crazier and crazier. which means that there's a bigger need for us to hear Kol Hashem in this generation more than there has ever been in any other generation. To hear the voice of Hashem as much as we possibly can. I'm going to tell you a personal story based on this concept. Personally, I experienced it. I was there. I watched it myself. I moved into an apartment. I used to work in property management in Seattle. I ended up taking an apartment. It was a 3-bedroom apartment. And, no, 4-bedroom apartment, I think. It's me and my wife, we have 1 kid. There's no reason for us to have it. I just got a super discount, so I just took a big apartment for no reason. So anyway, it ended up working out because my brother-in-law and sister-in-law also moved in there, whatever. But safe to say, during this living in this apartment was really the beginning of my truth and my returning to Hashem. Long before I knew anything about Rabbi Nachman, long before I knew anything about his brotherness, I was talking to Hashem, crying. At this point in my life, I was fasting. I would take 3 days. I would go and fast, begging Hashem for the truth. I didn't know the difference between, or I didn't know the emes, if it was Christianity, if it was Judaism or Islam. I was crying out to Hashem, just looking for the truth, just looking for the truth. Begging Hashem. Hours and hours and hours of tefillah, eyes bloodshot red, crying to Hashem. This is what I was doing. Fasting 3 days in a row, going with no food. I'm telling you, the emes. This apartment was filled with this, and this apartment is where I came to Yiddishkeit. So I'm just giving you that little bit of a background so you can understand when I say I was talking to Hashem, it was serious business. So finally, we realized that we wanted to be Megaya. We had to move out and move into the community that we were going to be Megaya in. Me, my wife, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and we moved. My apartment was available. Now I remember it was a 3-bedroom apartment. Sorry, it wasn't a 4-bedroom apartment. This is how I remember. There was a lady who lived inside the complex who was on public housing, Section 8 public housing. And the voucher that they gave her was originally 2-bedroom, but she had too many people living inside the house, so they eventually moved up her voucher to a 3-bedroom. There was no 3 bedrooms available in the whole entire complex. All of them were, completely full. And she was living off of Social Security. She didn't necessarily have money to go rent another apartment or to hire movers even for that matter. So she stuck. She has to take my apartment. What's the problem with my apartment? My apartment was on the ground floor. This woman, unfortunately, had been violated. Somebody had broken into her house before. She had been raped. She was very, very afraid. She had the biggest phobia from living on the ground floor. She came into the office crying in tears, begging that there be some other way, if she could hold out. But her back's against the wall. She doesn't move soon. She's going to lose her Section 8 voucher. And if she doesn't move there, she doesn't have too many options that she can depend on. So, story ends, she has to move into the apartment. She moves in. She's in the apartment for about 2.5 weeks or something like this. She ends up walking into the main office. And she comes up to me with tears in her eyes. She's got a balloon, some gift or a card, and a cup. And she comes and puts it, this happens in front of everybody. And she says, I brought you this because I know you prayed in this apartment. And you can't understand, I got chills running up on me because I know how much I prayed in that apartment. She says, I know you prayed in this apartment. She said, I want to tell you, I've never felt the presence of God so strong in my life as I do in this apartment. I've never felt more safe. And she said, I feel like God is in the walls in this place. And I got chills. Mamish got chills. What a person does, when a person cries out to Hashem, Imam should holy light into that place. Holy light. And you can bring down Hashem literally in a place where Hashem's presence would have never been recognized before. And this lady was not Jewish, but she obviously was very spiritually sensitive. And Baruch Hashem, she's a very sweet lady, but I don't know how much of a Christian she was either. Whatever, just being honest. But she was able to recognize it. The hashpah of a makom, a person builds a makom when you go and you separate yourself from the rest of the world, you go to a certain place, you can bring Hashem's presence over there and be mevatel everything. And you will get to know Hashem. It's important as we get into this next phase of wherever humanity is going, and whatever's going on right now in this world, it's only getting darker. It's only getting darker. So it's going to be depending on all of us to bring Hashem's light in this world, like we know Hashem, crying out to Hashem, spending time with Hashem, getting to know Hashem. It's so important. It's not a game. Nobody can tell me. I've seen so much with my own eyes. I've experienced so much with my own life. I haven't had the slightest effect that there's a Hashem in the world, and that Hashem is in the business of doing just as big of miracles as He did during Yetziat Mitzrayim. I don't buy none of it. You're not gonna tell. You're not selling me. There's no Nebuah in this generation and all this other. I don't believe it. First off, we know already from the Navi before Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to return all of these things back to the cloud. We don't know necessarily if it's coming directly all at one point, how it's going to look out. Nobody's got the handbook on any of these things. I've seen Hashem. I'm being honest with you. I don't need to sell you on anything. There's no benefit for me other than the fact that there's going to be a few more Yidden that get to know the Father in heaven a lot more. There's no other benefit for me. I'm not selling you on anything. And Baruch Hashem, I didn't have the challenge of growing up in England where people don't believe in Hashem. So it may be a little bit easier for me. But the emphasis is that each and every single one of you, if you can, take it upon yourself to spend some time getting to know your Father in heaven, going to speak their ship in your own words, and learning everything else is going to be there. You want to learn something? I advise people to take Tanakh and learn it. I set the Tanakh on the